I often think about the courage of a man like Neville Goddard, the courage that he portrayed, the courage that he really was an icon of in his life. The teachings of Neville Goddard have been so transformational and revelatory for so many millions of people in the 70, 80, 100 years ish that he was active. He really touched the lives of so many people, and it's easy to really engage with the work from the moment of now and really conceptualize our relationship to these teachings about the power of imagination to create reality from the context of the moment of now. And also, I often think about the type of courage that it required to be around the 1940s and really speaking about things like this. They say that we're living in a post-truth era, meaning that really at this point there's been so many different viewpoints that have been openly accepted and are now commonly discussed in the public discord that there really is, at least in modern internet culture, there's really no topic that can't be discussed. We have that type of freedom. It seems to, this liberty of the types of ideas that we can profess and we can explore publicly. And, back in the 1940s, 1930s, all the way up through perhaps, the 1970s when Neville passed away, it was a really different time in the culture. And to be, really speaking about these cutting edge metaphysical ideas, although he wasn't the first to speak of them, he really did bring them to an audience in a very courageous and compelling way. And so, really, I love the teachings that this man brought forth. And also, sometimes I find myself reflecting just on the courage of Neville, the human, to really be the embodiment of these perspectives, the embodiment of these teachings, and just the brazen impudence, the courage with which he presented these ideas to the world. Here in Sunday Mystery School, we are currently going through the questions and answers from Neville's original Mystery School Masterclass, which was taught in 1948, a radically different era than the era that we find ourselves alive and well in today. And yet the questions that the audience brought to Neville that made it to the transcription that we're talking about in these spaces really come from people who are perhaps really experiencing similar things in their lives as to what we are experiencing today. And I would say, even though I have profound appreciation for this entire masterclass, and I think it is one of the most valuable published works ever, like it literally stands apart, in my personal opinion, as one of the greatest published works ever, this masterclass. I do think that the questions and answers in many ways is my favorite part of the masterclass. And it's because it takes these ideas that are, fascinating to contemplate intellectually, spiritually, cognitively, even emotionally. And it takes these ideas and really makes them practical because they're now grounded in the form of questions from people who sat through this mystery school teaching with Neville. And then these are their questions about, how do I take what I just learned from you and apply it to my life in a very practical way? And so these questions are coming from, very practical context, from people living their lives and really seeking to apply the teachings of metaphysics to enhance their quality of life. And it's exactly where we find ourselves today. I mean, that's really the purpose. Yes, mystery school is an exploration just by definition of the mysteries of that phenomena. What is it in our consciousness that creates an experience for us to even be aware of? What is the I am that each of us is? What is that? And what is the relationship between the awareness of being aware and that which we are aware of? That's the fundamental question. I can't really think of a bigger question than that. And then there's all of the ways to apply that question to our everyday lives and experiences. And that's really where we find ourselves in this exploration of the Q&A session. And so really, I think that, as I said, I think this is one of my favorite parts. I think it's also really where we start to ground the practicality of some of these teachings. And I love how the questions that are asked by these students really are revelatory of the state of the student. And this just, goes back to this idea of, the state of being that we are in determines the questions that we ask. When we are in a state of being where we believe, that something outside of us is the cause of our reality, then we're asking questions about the second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th cause, right? Everything is, a linkage of causes. Everything has, this origin that, maybe extends way far away and then leads to the situation that we're dealing with in the present moment. So we could be asking questions about, what was the cause that immediately preceded this situation? Well, it might be the 20th or the 50th or the 150th cause. But in this space, we ask questions about the first cause. That first cause is the consciousness. What is it about my consciousness that has created my reality, that has created my life, that has created these situations, these circumstances, these people, places, things, and events? That's the place. And that is revelatory. That level of questioning is revelatory of an awakened being, a being, conscious being in a human form who has awakened to the level of revelation and realization, self-realization, that we are life-giving spirits. That is the nature of the first cause, that we are life-giving spirits, meaning that it is our consciousness that gives life to what we witness on the outside. It is our consciousness that is the first cause. We're going to continue today with these questions and answers from the original Masterclass by Neville Goddard, and we're picking up well into this body of questions. So we're going to look back for a moment just to kind of reconnect to that stream of thought that we've been weaving over time together in these sessions. And then we will continue moving forward in the questions. So the last question that we answered in the last Sunday Mystery School session was about Neville's technique of prayer, his personal technique of prayer. What is your technique of prayer was the question asked by the student. And Neville says, it really all starts with desire. Desire is the mainspring of action. You have to want something or feel an urge or a desire or kind of a motivation towards something. That's what, desire is really the initiation of prayer. You have to know and define what your objective is. And then the process of prayer is condensing what you desire into a sensation, which implies it is fulfilled. So this is really boiling down this idea of what is a desire. Well, a desire is to have a sensation. You could say that a desire is, and then you could give this big story about what you want to have happen. But really, what you really want is a specific sensation that happens at the end of that story. Like you go through the whole arc of character development and you arrive at the end and there's a specific sensation that you arrive at. And that's really what you desire. You don't necessarily, your desire doesn't necessarily care about, although it may imply, it doesn't necessarily care about the whole bridge of incidents. Your desire is really a link to a specific sensation. You have a desire to feel with the calm sense of knowing that you are the person that you desire to be, that you are in the place in life, the station in life that you desire to be in. Well, that's a sensation. So really this idea of prayer, what prayer is, and we're reclaiming the word prayer to be clear here, because, for many hundreds, thousands of years, human beings were taught that prayer was supplication, meaning a form of request to a being outside of ourselves for some sort of grace or mercy to give us an experience. And that's the outdated old paradigm definition of the word prayer. So we're reclaiming that and giving it its proper definition, and we're putting it in its proper place as a tool. So what prayer is creating in our imagination, in our mind's eye, in our awareness, in our consciousness, in our first cause, creating a sensation that is the fulfillment of the desire. Okay, so this is a skill. When you phrase it that way, this is not something we're asking an external being to do for us. This is now a skill, and it's a skill of assuming a state. And that state feels a certain way. And so prayer is the process of becoming aware of what that state is and then moving into it, making it that permanent address that your awareness resides in. Okay, so Neville says, once you have clearly defined your desire, what is that sensation that would imply that my desire is fulfilled? Once that is defined, we immobilize our physical body and we experience in our imagination the action which implies the fulfillment of the desire. Okay, so there's action to this. So it's a sensation of doing. Okay, there's some sort of action. You're shaking someone's hand, you're, walking up a set of stairs, you're, swiping a card, you're signing your name, you're, putting your family picture over a fireplace. Like, you're doing something, and that's a sensation. And you would only be doing that thing. You would only be experiencing that sensation were your desire a realized fact. And this is the art of prayer. We're crafting this experience. We're crafting a scene. And then we are immobilizing our physical body and experiencing in our imagination the action which implies its fulfillment. And Neville says the key here is to repeat this action over and over again until it has the vividness and feeling of reality. Neville says you can also condense your desire into a single phrase, which implies fulfillment, such as, "Thank you, Father." So rather than asking a being outside of yourself, you are thanking your infinite source that is the source of your awareness, that is the source of your experience, that is the source of your reality, that is your first cause. You're thanking your first cause. Thank you, Father. Father being a word that implies the first cause. Thank you, consciousness. Thank you, my consciousness. Thank you, my source. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Isn't it wonderful? It is finished. Repeating this condensed phrase, repeating this action in your imagination over and over again. And then you either awaken from the state or you slip off into the deep of sleep. And that doesn't really matter, because the act is done once you fully accept that it is done while in the sleepy, drowsy state. Once you accept it as being finished in that sleepy, drowsy state. So you have to be in the portal if we're really going to interpret this in the strictest sense. And I think that it makes sense to start there, and then where it feels appropriate, we can, kind of widen the circle. But we're going to start in the strictest interpretation. So the strictest interpretation, based not only on the science of brainwave states, but also what Neville is saying. He says, you really need to accept it as being done, being finished, while you are in the portal. Okay, so what is the portal? The portal is a widening of access to your subconscious mind. What your subconscious mind accepts as true becomes part of your state. And what is part of your state becomes visible in your world. Okay, so you want to know what state you're in, open your eyes and take a look around your world. See what surrounds you in terms of physical objects. Also see how people treat you. People reveal to you by their behavior the state that you're in, because, they're only going to treat you really in a way that on some level of your being, you accept that you are treating yourself. Okay, because they're just evidence of you treating yourself a certain way. While you're in that portal state of awareness, while your brain waves are slow and deep, you could say, it's the alpha theta cusp. It's not quite dreaming, but it's dream-like. But you still have control over your attention. That's direct access to the programming console of your subconscious mind. And while you are in that state, that's when you need to arrive at acceptance that it is done. I'm going to give you a personal example. So I was doing some work on the exterior of my house a few days ago, and there was something that was damaged in the work that I was doing. And I didn't like it that it was damaged. I was not willing to accept this. So my physical eyes showed me that it was damaged. And then I was like, wait a second. I don't have to accept the evidence of what my physical eyes see because I know what the first cause is. So that night, as I laid in bed, falling asleep for the evening, like falling asleep for the night, in my imagination, I pulled that object into my awareness while I was in that sleepy state. And I just saw it in its fixed, not even fixed, because that implies that it was broken to begin with. I saw it in its perfect original state. And I saw it over and over and over again. And I ran my hand along the part of the object that was broken, and I felt that it was whole. Okay, so I refused to accept the evidence of my senses, which my eyes showed me that this thing was damaged. Okay. In my mind's eye, in that window of sleep, I ran my hand back and forth and I felt that it was perfect. I just felt that it was perfect. And I felt that it was perfect. And I felt that it was perfect. And I was in that sleepy state of awareness when I arrived at the perfect image of it being perfect, undamaged in its original condition. Okay. And I knew while I was drifting off to sleep, I knew that I had arrived at that image because I was able to hold the object in my mind's eye and see it in its original state. Perfect. Okay. So I woke up the next morning, and at some point during the day, I remembered the whole thing. I remembered what the original evidence of my senses told me that this thing had broken. I remembered the imaginal act, and I had the idea, I'm going to go look at this object and confirm that it is in its original condition. And so I went outside and I went out to the yard where this object was, and it was in perfect condition. There was no visual indication whatsoever that this object was ever damaged. And I ran my hand back and forth over it where previously my senses had told me something was wrong. Now it was perfect, just as I had seen in my imagination the night before. Now, if you've never attended Sunday Mystery School, to you, this might sound some sort of way. But that's only because you are used to thinking about the 5th, 50th, 200th cause, okay? Here in this space, we talk about the first cause. We talk about that object only exists really in my consciousness. So if I know that that object exists in my consciousness, then of course I have the opportunity to shift how it exists in my consciousness by using my awareness. If the whole universe is a projection of my consciousness, then is it really outside the realm of possibility for me to be able to alter how something, an object that is in my consciousness, that is part of the whole universe, that is part of my consciousness, is showing up? Okay, first cause. Okay, so this is a profound example of it was an act of revision. Those of you that understand Neville's teachings, that was revising. It was taking something that happened and changing it. Something that happened earlier in the day, evidence of the senses, sensory impressions, inputs. And I revised them as I fell asleep in that window, in that portal state, access to the programmer's console. I just pulled up that object and I reset it to its original blueprint. Okay. And then I confirmed that it was that way in my imagination by placing my awareness upon it and seeing it as perfect. Okay. So this is how this is done. Okay. So the key is to accept it as being finished in that sleepy, drowsy state. And that's exactly what I arrived to. And I knew because it clicked. There was while I was reshaping the image of it, there was a few times when I created the holographic image of the object in my mind's eye, at first it showed up the way I had last seen it with my physical eyes. And I was like, no. Reset to original blueprint. It should look in its original way. It should be in its original state. And so I had to reshape it in my mind's eye. And then once I reshaped it in my mind's eye, it was running my hand up and down it over and over again, confirming that it was in its original perfect form. And I knew when I got to the point where I had run my hand back and forth over it for about the 15th time, and I knew that it was perfect, I felt this little click in my awareness. And I was like, okay, it's done. Okay, it's done. And this is the thing. You know when it's done, and you also know when it's almost. Okay, so there's a subtle nuance to this, and it's not anything anyone else can say for you. Obviously, this is something that's communion between you and God. This is happening in the silence of your own awareness. You're speaking to your source. You're in your own programmer's console. It's not really something that can be observed by someone else, but in your heart of hearts, when it is done. And so I reached that place where I was like, yes, okay, this is done. I know this is done. So reaching that while in that sleepy state, that's what confirmed the creative power. Okay, that's what confirmed the creative power had been used. Okay, so I came back out of that experience. The next morning, because I fell asleep, came out of that experience, and reality was now in conformity to the place I had shifted to in the portal state. Okay. All right. So that's looking back at the last question from last week, but with some new clarity and also a personal example. Okay. The next question is question number 23. And this one is fascinating for so many reasons. The question goes like this. 2 people desire the same position. One of these 2 people has the position. The second person used to have the position and now wants it back. Okay, so this is Neville's answer. Neville says, your father, the dimensionally greater you, has ways and means you know not of. Accept his wisdom. Feel your desire is fulfilled, and then allow your father to give it to you. The present one may be promoted to a higher position. They may marry someone of great wealth and give up their job. They may come into a great deal of money, or they may choose to move to another state. There are so many ways that this desire can be fulfilled, and we don't have to know what they are. Our dimensionally greater self can take care of it, okay? Dimensionally greater self can write the story that connects the ideas together. So you're the current state, you move into the new state, now there's some sort of narrative that is an arc of character development that brings you from the old state to the outpicturing of the new state, and that's the part you don't have to write. That's the part of you that your co-author, which is your dimensionally larger source, writes with you, but doesn't need you to help it with. Okay, so it's co-authorship. We write the end. Our source writing co-author is responsible for the bridge. Okay, so we can trust it to do a fantastic job for that. And so Neville is saying there's all these ways that it could connect those dots. If you want the position that you used to have, but someone else now has it, you can have it back, and you don't have to worry about what will happen to them. You can just imagine that you're back in it and trust that the co-author will write a beautiful story that ties the narrative together. And then Neville adds some opinion here at the end. He says, many people say they want to work, but I really do question that. I have serious questions about people if they truly want to work. He says, really, what people want is security. And most people are conditioned to believe that security comes from a job. Okay, so this is an example of the era in which Neville was teaching, the 1940s. I mean, many, many people conditioned to security on a job. They were not living in a time such as we are today, where the multitude of opportunities, is a completely different set of opportunities back then. And now we've really graduated into this, polyverse of opportunities. So back then in particular, it was societal conditioning that a job means security. Okay. But really, what he's saying is, he says, I do not think the average person truly wants to get up in the morning and go to work. And I think he's onto something there. I think when we have a desire to really live our values, and work presents itself as an opportunity for us to live our values, then maybe that's a true desire. But I think that, just this desire to get up and work because society has conditioned us to believe that security comes from a job. Okay, that's less true today, but there's still some of us that were raised from families that had thinking ingrained in that way. And so some of us were taught that our ability to be secure was dependent upon a job. And Neville's challenging that assumption with his little statement here at the end. He says, really, I do not think the average person truly wants to get up in the morning and go to work. The average person really wants to be an embodiment of their values. And a lot of people are more creative. Some people have found their chosen work, obviously, and that may be a different scenario. But just to work for the sake of working because we're conditioned to believe that's where security comes from, he's challenging the root of that assumption. Okay. Moving on to question 24. What is the cause of disease and pain? Wow. What is the cause of disease and pain? Here's Neville's answer. He says, the physical body is an emotional filter. The physical body is an emotional filter. Okay, so that makes sense on a couple different levels here. So literally, if we do not have a physical body, we do not feel emotions. Okay, so one of the reasons why we as life-giving spirits choose to give life to a physical body is so that we can physically feel, through the release of neurotransmitters, emotions. Okay, that's part of the human energy template, is a mechanism for feeling. Life without emotional feeling is very different. And Earth in particular has been designed to help us feel emotions as we learn. I mean, it's a mystery school planet. So we're all here for mystery school, and we chose to go about our mystery school learning wearing bodies that are emotional filters so that we can feel that things are real, and we can get feedback, and we can get sensory data, inputs, education, learning, a depth, a variety of experience. I mean, it's all of those things, right? I mean, the bottom line is we're here to experience. And the physical human body and its ability to feel emotions is a key element of that experience. Okay, so Neville says the physical body is an emotional filter. He says many human ailments, which previously were thought to be just physical ailments, there's just literally, something materially wrong, okay, or out of alignment, purely physical. It's a mechanical problem. Okay. Now Neville is saying a lot of these are now recognized as being rooted in emotional disturbances. Now, this is probably not news to any of us here at Sunday Mystery School. If you've made it to Sunday Mystery School, you've probably walked a long path already in your life of really learning the nature of reality and how it operates. And I think part of that long path that a lot of us have walked is beginning to understand some of the nuances of the experience of what I've come to call the human energy template, which is our mind, body, imagination complex, our physicality, our the part of us that is an energy being, the part of us that has a light body, all of those things integrated into a tangible physical human experience. What Neville is saying is that now we're starting to recognize, at least in this era of the 1940s, they were kind of at the beginning of recognizing in some ways that physical disease and pain often originates from emotional disturbances, because we are, so an emotional state. So emotion. So one of the ways that I've been taught to relate to the idea of emotion is E stands for energy, and motion is the motion of that energy. So emotion is moving energy. Okay? It's one way to understand what emotion is. It's energy in movement or energy in flow. Okay, so our bodies are filters. Okay, so when there's strong emotions, maybe even, I mean, they could be positive or negative, but we're implying ailments and diseases. So we can assume that maybe there's some more negative, strong emotions that get stuck in the filter of our experience, as opposed to just feeling them and releasing them. Maybe there's some sort of resistance. We hold on to them, or maybe we don't allow ourselves to fully feel them. So now these vibrations that are the energy in motion. Okay. So it's like they're flowing through, but now it gets stuck, and it gets stuck in the field. And so that stuck energy is now hanging around and having an ongoing influence potentially upon the physical human body. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, oh, but if it's all an imagination, can't you just release it? Well, yes, absolutely. This is not a burden that is unescapable. Rather, you can discharge this through the power of imagination, and that can look like a lot of different ways. There's all kinds of healing modalities that do that. The key is to reclaim your power of imagination, and to, imagination is a skill, right? So to skillfully apply imagination, to release the emotions, to release the disturbances that may be manifesting as pain or disease within your physical human body. Okay. So, again, first cause, that's it. That's the ace card. There is nothing with more weight in your awareness than the first cause. So your imagination is the most powerful tool you have. And using imagination, you can, of course, discharge emotional disturbances. And there's all types of modalities and techniques to do so. But the first step is to recognize your power to do so. Okay, so now Neville's going to give some insights into some connections between emotional disturbances and ailments. So he says, pain in particular comes from a lack of relaxation. When you sleep, there is no pain. If you are under an anesthetic, there is no pain because you are relaxed, as it were. If you have pain, it is because you are tense and you are trying to force something. You cannot force an idea into embodiment. You must simply appropriate it. Appropriation is attention minus effort. Only practice brings you to the point where you can be attentive and still be relaxed. Okay, so there's a wealth here. Let's dig into it. You cannot force an idea into embodiment. You can only appropriate it. Okay, so if you are trying to force an idea into embodiment, it's because you don't truly believe that you have and possess the power of the first cause. Okay, there's some aspect of your being, some aspect of your awareness that is still not fully bought to the pearl of great price, that says, I am the cause of my reality. So if there's some energy of trying to force, there's something under that energy that is not in that place of calm acceptance that Neville speaks of as being required to manifest. Remember 2 weeks ago, we were talking about someone in the 1948 audience asked, if I get too sleepy, you would think that would mean a lack of emotion. And Neville said, I'm not talking about some huge spike of emotion. I'm talking about, feeling it real is a calm acceptance that it is done. It's not this big spike of emotional energy. It's this calm acceptance that it is done. So that's this word that Neville used throughout his whole career called appropriate. Appropriation is I look at it and I see that it is there. I have appropriated it from the first cause, right? It's like I have the infinite warehouse. I have the world's largest giga warehouse of all possible things. And appropriation is just simply walking to the part of the warehouse where that thing is and looking at it and saying, I see you. It's not forcing something that isn't there into being. It's walking to the part of the warehouse where it already is and looking at it and saying, I see you. Attention minus effort. Appropriation. Okay. Attention without effort. You're just walking to it and you're looking at it and you're acknowledging it that it's already there. And the feeling is the secret. The feeling is a calm acceptance that it is done. Okay. So Neville says that's the goal here. You can't force an idea to come out. You can only appropriate it. You can only accept that it is done in that place of attention without effort. Okay. That's how first cause operates. Okay. Now, obviously in this modern world, there's a lot of people that have it twisted and they're dealing with the 2000th cause. And so they're thinking that they have to, grind it out into being, right? And that's way down the line. We're talking about the level of the first cause, and the first cause can't force anything. It can only accept that it already is. That's an appropriation. That's how first cause operates. Okay. So Neville says this requires practice. And I can tell you from personal experience, both of myself and from the countless students that I've worked with over the years, this is a skill to be practiced. Okay. Practicing that place of attention without effort, that, connecting to that infinite storehouse, that infinite warehouse, that, the mega giga warehouse that has everything in it. And then in your mind's eye, just walking to that thing that you are desiring and appropriate. Oh, there it is. That requires practice. There's a learning, there's an unlearning, and there's a relearning, because many of us have been conditioned to pay attention to the 20th or 200th cause. Okay. And Sunday Mystery School is an unlearning of that way of thinking, a new learning, right, of this first cause way of thinking. And then there's relearning that happens every time we revisit these ideas. Okay. Attention, in that very word, attention is tension toward an end. Tension toward an end. Relaxation is the opposite. Okay. Here are two completely opposite ideas that you must blend until you learn through practice how to be attentive without tension. Attentive, but not tense. Aware of the thing without trying to force it with your energy. Okay? The word contention means attention minus effort. Contention means attention minus effort, according to Neville. In the state of contention, you are held by the idea without tension. Okay. Attention minus effort. When you are in that state, you are held by the idea. Okay, so I like this. So it's like, am I holding the idea or is the ideal holding me? Okay, so maybe flipping that around so that you feel that the idea that you desire is actually holding you, the presence of I am. The idea is holding the presence of I am rather than I am holding the presence of the idea. I mean, it can go either way, but maybe just playing with that in your mind's eye can help you achieve this state of focus without effort. Okay, if I'm being held by the idea and I am the I am power that's the life-giving spirit that gives that idea the ability to spring into life, maybe just my mere presence is the attention. And then the I am that I am, there is no effort. It's already done. But that mere process of being held by the idea as a life-giving spirit is what gives it the ability to spring into life. Okay. Question 25. No matter how much I try to be happy, underneath it, I have a melancholy feeling of being left out. Why? Why do I feel this way? No matter how much I try to be happy, I have a melancholy feeling of being left out. Why do I feel this way? Here's Neville's answer. Simply, you feel you are not wanted. If I were you, Neville says, I would assume I am wanted. You know the technique. The assumption that you are wanted may seem false when first assumed, but if you will feel wanted and respected and persist in that assumption, you will be amazed how others will seek you out. They will begin to see qualities in you they had never seen before. I promise you, if you will but assume you are wanted, you will be. Okay. Have you ever heard people talk about the most attractive quality in anyone? The most attractive quality in anyone? What is it? It's confidence. Pretty much unanimously, if you were just to go out and ask anyone, what is the most attractive quality in someone, anyone? Whether it be a prospective partner, friend, just people you meet in public, right? Like, what is the most attractive quality? Most people would say confidence. Okay. Why is that? Because that person who is in a state of confidence is assuming they are wanted. Okay. Confidence. I am wanted. My presence is important here. Okay. Not, I'm not talking about airs. I'm talking about confidence. Okay. I'm not talking about ego. I'm talking about confidence. Okay. So these things can be distinguished. Okay. So confidence is, I feel I am wanted. That does not imply an improperly sized ego. That implies a feeling of belonging. If being left out is what you don't want, a feeling of belonging is what you do want. Okay. So a feeling of belonging, I have every right to be here. I belong here. That fosters a sense of confidence. And it turns out that we as a civilization find confidence extremely attractive. Okay. So those two ideas go hand in hand, right? So you can see Neville is saying here, look, if you assume that you are wanted and respected, if you persist in that assumption of belonging, you'll be amazed at how others will seek you out. Why? Because that's confidence and it's extremely attractive. Of course, other people will seek you out because confidence is attractive. In fact, it's probably, even just through, because people who are confident have a different body language than people who are not confident. So even just without opening your mouth and walking through a public place, okay, like that's attractive energy, being confident, feeling comfortable in your own skin, owning your presence, right? Owning your energy. Okay, that's extremely attractive. And that is a projection of confidence. It's a state of confidence which comes out. That's why I call it projection. It comes out into your field as confidence. That's that feeling of being wanted. So if this person has this melancholy feeling of feeling left out, they're in that old state, they're not walking in a state of confidence. Okay. So they're not attracting others in the way that confidence attracts others. Okay. So they're perpetuating their feeling of being left out by walking in a state that is unattractive. Okay. And unattractive seems like kind of harsh, but I'm literally talking about like magnetic pulls. Okay. So if they're walking around with a feeling of melancholy and feeling left out, okay, their energy is not magnetized. Okay. It is that piece of steel that is non-magnetic. Okay. So they're literally like walking through and their energy is not generating any type of pull or disturbance in the energy of others. Whereas someone who walks through as a magnet, they're fully charged in their state of confidence. As they walk through, there's literally a magnetic energy radiating off of them, which other people feel. both consciously in some cases and subconsciously. And they like literally are, I'm saying all of this and I'm speaking of it kind of abstractly, but in my mind's eye, I can literally see that the biofields around people, walking through a public place and noting how the biofield, which is invisible to the physical eyes, but very perceivable from the third eye, the biofield is literally interacting with other people's biofields. Even if you don't notice the person, if you're in the vicinity of another, you're exchanging energy. Okay. So naturally that energy is originating from the state that you are in. So when you are in a state of confidence, your biofield is animating that way. Okay. And that is impacting the energies of people around you, both in your vicinity, but also because we understand ideas such as quantum entanglement, right? It's not just limited to people around you. It's actually the universe, right? There's like literally your energy affects the universe. Okay. So the state that you're in literally impacts everything because you and the universe are one. Okay. So it's like you can go super vast with it and you can go local of like, how am I affecting, the other people in line with me at the drive-through. Okay. So it's like you can go both ways with it. It's the same thing on different scales. Okay. If you will but assume you are wanted, if you will but enter that state of confidence, you will be. Okay. So confidence comes from the state of feeling wanted. When I feel wanted, I am confident, right? So that's like my presence is wanted here. Okay. That gives me confidence to be here. So I can feel that and make that true within my own awareness. And then when I walk into my world, again, if I want to know what state I'm in, I just open my eyes and look around the world. People come to me and tell me by their behavior what state I'm in. So when I'm in that state of animating confidence, people come and want more of that because they're simply showing back to me my state of being wanted. Okay. In that mirror-like reflection from the external world, reflecting back the state that I am in. Okay. Question number 26. This is a fascinating one. I mean, all of these, but this one, wow. Okay. If security, meaning a very large financial sum, came to me through the death of a loved one, did I cause them to die? Okay. So I'm imagining security, right? So back then that was probably like 50K. Today it's probably like 50M. Okay. So you're like imagining 50M and then someone dies and leaves you an inheritance check for 50 million. Okay. So like, did you cause them to die in your imagination, like through that imaginal act? Fascinating question. This is what Neville says. Don't think for 1 second that you caused someone to die by assuming security. The greater you that knows that it is one with all beings is not going to injure anyone. The greater you sees all and knows the length of life of all. The greater you can inspire the other to give you that which can fulfill your assumption. Okay? You did not kill the person who named you in his will. It's kind of hilarious to say it that way. You did not kill the person who named you in his will. If a few days after your complete acceptance of the idea of security, Uncle John made his exit from the three-dimensional plane and left you a $50 million estate, it is only because it was indeed time for Uncle John to go. He did not die 1 second before his time. However, the greater you saw the lifespan of John and used him as the way to bring about the fulfillment of your feeling of security. The acceptance of the end wills the means toward the fulfillment of that end. Remember, you have a co-author. Okay. So you're the author, you've got a co-author. So you write the end, that's your job. Okay. And your job description of whatever character you're playing in this human lifetime, your job, once your awareness wakes up to the level of understanding first cause, once you make it to mystery school and are taught these things, now your job description from this moment forward is you write the end. Always. That's your job. This is Mystery School Planet. Your job is to learn how to do this while you're on this planet. Okay. So your role is to write the end, and your co-author, which is your source, crafts the bridge. Okay. So you decide, hey, I'm on this shore. I want to be on that island. You write the scene of being on that island, and your source, which is your imagination, your dimensionally greater self, will build the bridge. Okay. It'll gather all the steel beams, all of the workers, all the project managers, all of the architects, all of the energy required to build the bridge. The co-author takes care of all of that. Your job is to write the scene relaxing on the island, okay? After you have walked the bridge that your conscious source will build for you, okay? That's your job, okay? So that's acceptance of the end. That wills the means towards the fulfillment of the end. You are not concerned with anything but the end. Always bear in mind that the responsibility to make it so is completely removed from your shoulders. It's not in your job description, okay? Your job description only says your roles and responsibilities. As co-author, the role of Josiah Brandt in his human form is to write the end scene, a condensed sensation that implies the fulfillment of his desire. What is the man that Josiah desires to be? What is that person like? What is the sensation that would imply that he is now that man? His role and responsibility will be to write that scene that contains that sensation. This is the end of the responsibilities of his role. Okay? So that is true for all of us. And then our co-author's role and responsibility is everything else. Okay? Everything required to make it so, the co-author takes care of. Okay? Neville says, it is yours because you accept it as so. Remember, that calm acceptance while in the portal state, excuse me, a calm acceptance while you're in the portal state, that is what wills the fulfillment of the end. Okay. Question 27. I have more than one objective. Would it be ineffective to concentrate on different objectives at different periods of concentration? I have more than one objective, more than one desire. Who doesn't, right? All of us do. But is it ineffective to concentrate on different desires at different times? I think everyone's had this question. Here's what Neville says. Personally, I like to take one consuming ambition, restrict it to a single short phrase or a single short act that implies fulfillment. But I do not limit my ambition. I know that my real objective will include all the little ones. Okay, so I think what Neville is getting at here is he's saying, find what the true desire is. Okay, so there's a question. Okay, so we are, Sunday Mystery School, we are in the process of accepting questions from our Sunday Mystery School audience for our own question and answer live stream coming up once we have finished Neville's question and answers. And many of you have submitted questions already. There's many questions already in there. I was reading through them earlier this week. Keep them coming. If you have questions that you would like to be answered in a format like this, this is an incredible opportunity to do so. The link to do that, the link to the Google form where you can submit your question is in the video description on YouTube. And you can submit as many questions as you would like to, okay? In those questions, one of them that I read this past week was something to the effect of, I notice my desire keeps changing. Now, the person that wrote this question, they did not specify exactly what the desire was. But reading the question gave me this kind of mental picture, psychic image of like, I want, this SUV. No. Actually, I think I want this SUV. Oh, no. I think actually this one's better, or this one looks cooler. Maybe I want this one. And so it's like, which SUV do I imagine that I have? Because it seems to change every week. Okay. So this is where I think what Neville would say is your true desire is one step bigger, okay, than like the individual SUV. So maybe your true desire is a large luxury vehicle that feels, modern and safe and maybe sexy. If you're a car person, maybe it's a sexy car. You have that impression of it, right? So like that's a feeling, that's a sensation. Okay. So like your true desire is that. And so that doesn't change, and that if you hold that true desire, then the model that fits that and makes you feel that way is a match for that sensation that you've calmly accepted as being yours will find you. Okay. As opposed to you having to find it. So if your desire is changing all the time, it's because you haven't found the true desire yet. So you need to go one step bigger. Okay. And then allow that one step bigger to find its perfect match. Okay. The real objective will include all the little ones. Okay. So it's like, make sure that desire that you are crafting the fulfillment, that scene that you're building, the sensation, that scene should imply a lot of the littler things. Okay. So if you're in the perfect SUV, that implies that it's everything you could have possibly imagined you wanted, as opposed to like having to individually list all those things and then go and look for which one fits, right? Just build it in your imagination. You don't have to know the details. Okay. So that's the key idea here. Imagine big enough that all the little things are included, and make sure it's a consuming ambition. That's important too. Like when it's a true desire, there's a sense of urgency to it. Like, let me go ahead and pray about this now. Okay. Pray meaning appropriate. Okay. In that drowsy state of awareness. Now, again, Mystery School, we go to the strictest interpretation and then we can widen the circle from there. So I also got questions about, hey, I don't do the drowsy thing and I seem to manifest just fine. Is that okay? If you're just manifesting just fine, yes, of course that's okay. But to keep it, rigorous for our study here, because this is Sunday Mystery School, we're going into the mysteries. So to keep it an element of academic rigor, we have to define this is the gold standard of how we do it. Obviously, you can widen the circle from there. Okay, but we start with the gold standard. So I just wanted to quickly address that too. Okay. Let's do one more question. Question number 28. I find it difficult to change my concept of self. Why is that? Why do I find it difficult to change my concept of self? Fantastic question. Here's a great answer. It is because your desire to change has not been aroused. Your desire to change has not been aroused. If you would fall in love with what you really want to be, you would become it. It takes an intense hunger to bring about a transformation of self. As the heart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O Lord. If you would become as thirsty for perfection as the little heart is for water, that it braves the anger of the tiger in the forest, you would become perfect. What a phenomenally beautiful answer to a very important question. If you're finding it difficult to change your concept of self, it's because your desire to change has not truly been aroused. Okay? So there's this really intense state of arousal, falling in love with the ideal. If it's not an ideal that inspires you to fall in love with it, then you're not dreaming big enough. This image should be so compelling that it is all-consuming. It should be the sort of thing that it lights your fire, makes your heart sing. Anything short of that, if you think that you are desiring something that doesn't light you up in that way, you are probably chasing a desire that you were conditioned to have. Okay, so let me give you an example. We currently live in an era on planet Earth. It will not always be like this, okay? But right now, and for recent history, okay, money has been a very important part of our civilization. This will not always be the case, but right now it is, okay? So many of us, through social media, through TV shows and movies, and just truthfully nonstop programming for every moment of our lives since we were born on Earth, we were told that money is supremely important, okay? So many of us learn about first cause, learn about imagination. We're like, oh, okay, I'm going to be a millionaire. Thinking that that makes all the sense in the world. Of course, money is so important. I must need money. Let me be a millionaire. But really not necessarily realizing that that is a conditioned desire. Why is it conditioned? Because it's conditional, because it's subject to the conditions that we're living in right now. Okay. It's maybe not really the desire of your soul. Do you see the difference? Okay. So conditionally, okay. So in 300 years, when money is no longer required, is your heart going to pant after money like your soul panteth after your God? No, of course not. Right. So it's conditional. Right now, you feel that you want it, but is it all consuming? Probably not. Okay. So money for the sake of money is most likely not enough to create an arousal that you fall in love with. Okay. Now, some people do it. Okay. But for many people, money for the sake of money alone is not enough to light that passion of your soul. You don't burn for money. Some of you don't. Perhaps many of you do not. Okay. So to set that as your chief definite aim, and then to wonder why you can't change your concept of self to that of being a millionaire, well, now we have the answer why it's not working. Okay. Because it's not something that has aroused you to the state of falling in love with it. Okay. So this is why whenever I do wealth mindset coaching, we always talk about, what are you going to do with the money? Okay. What is your true purpose for being here? Okay. It's always like, okay, you've got all of the abundance. You weren't living just for a bank balance. You're living for something more than that. What is that thing that makes your heart sing? Okay. So connecting to that as the true desire, and then understanding that that big thing includes all the little things. Remember, that was the last question Neville answered. He said, I don't limit my ambition. I know that imagining the big thing will include all the little things. Okay. So in this case, maybe millions of dollars is part of that little thing because it's conditional. Okay. It's not enough to light your heart on fire in and of itself. Okay. But the real true desire, the real yearning of your heart is, and it just so happens that that true yearning of your heart also includes the millions of dollars. Okay. So this is where you can begin to make that distinction. To change your concept of yourself, if you're finding it difficult, it's because you don't want it. The way that this Bible verse from Psalms, as the heart panteth after the water brook, so my soul panteth after thee, O Lord. There is a profound thirst there. There is a passion, a fire in your soul. That is what is required to truly change your self-concept, okay? To brave the anger of the tiger in the forest. Okay, so the heart is another word for deer. Okay, so the deer is so thirsty, it goes to the water knowing that it could be risking its very life just to get a drink of that cool water. And in this case, that cool water is the fulfillment of your true desire. And you will do anything to taste that water, okay, which obviously is, your desires are self-fulfilled, right? So it's still this first cause way of doing that, but your passion towards doing it is aroused in that way. Okay. So it's a key distinction here. Okay. If you desired with this level of passion, you would become perfect. You would become perfect. Okay. We're going to take this opportunity to go back to the Zoom room and invite anybody we have in the Zoom room. I see. Oh, yeah. We go. Give me 1 second to switch over here. Anybody in the Zoom room who has any contributions? There we go. Or Lena. Hi.
Hi. So I have a question.
Yes.
I wrote it down. So I said, so is the underlying issue for most people having a feeling like they are not good enough? And that's what allows them to not like really accept the true power of like who they are, like as far as being the operant power.
Yes. I think you are right on the source of it.
Okay.
It comes down to worthiness, feeling worthy, feeling I am enough. In fact, I'm going to go just a little bit esoteric here because this is such an important thing. Okay.
And then I have another question on top of that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yep.
But yeah. So if that's the case, then what do you think Neville would say to resolve that?
Fantastic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they call it. I've heard teachers refer to this as the existential wound. Okay. So we're in that place where we are one with all that is, and we feel it innately. Okay. And then we incarnate into a physical human body, and there's an aspect of our soul that feels abandoned. Okay. This is Jesus on the cross, right? Father, why have you forsaken me? Okay. That's what the Bible is alluding to, this idea of feeling abandoned. Okay. So you could call it an existential wound that every human being would have on some level of feeling abandoned. And so out of that feeling of abandonment can arise this feeling of I'm not good enough to be part of oneness, because look at the separation that I seem to perceive. I seem to be here and God seems to be not here. Okay. Particularly, if you haven't made it to mystery school yet, like seems to be not here. So then there's this feeling of separation. It's like this existential wounding. And so with that can come this feeling of I am not enough. So I think that that's something all humans in varying levels of awareness of it for sure. But all humans, I think, could potentially face that, because we all are Jesus on the cross at some point saying, Father, why have you forsaken me? Okay, so I think that is where a lot of the issues that come up around being operant power is, as you mentioned, but really all kinds of things come out of this. All kinds of things come out of this. I'm not enough, or I'm not worthy. Like that really is, I would say, the source of a lot of human suffering. Okay, so part two of your question, what would Neville say to resolve this? So obviously, the simplest answer is, well, I am enough. I am innately enough. I am innately worthy. And I've heard him talk about some of these things. So I really do think it is a state. Okay. So Neville has spoken about, rather than going to a church to feel connected to God, like understanding that the body itself is the temple of the living God, and really feeling, the awe that some people feel when they go to a church, but feeling that awe just where you are, no matter what your environment is, you in your physical human body are in the presence of God and actively feeling that. So Neville talks about feeling that, feeling that he is literally the temple of the living God. And So I think he would say, feeling what the feeling would be like, were we to feel that we are enough, and then actively brewing that feeling by feeling the presence of God within, by feeling that my body is a temple of the living God, by feeling connected to, as opposed to this, Father, why have you forsaken me? It's that, no, actually, I could never be separate from, like, it's all one thing. And then building our relationship to this idea that it is all one thing. I am a part of everything. Everything is here with me, and I am enough, and I am worthy.
Okay. Are there any tangible things that we can do
tangible things?
Yes. To cultivate that?
Yeah. So I would say sitting in the silence. Like, if you've ever had like a religious experience, and maybe in the past, like you connected that with going to church, but like the church was just a prop. Okay. Like you can conjure a religious experience, you just in and of yourself. So I would say tangibly, the thing to do would be to set aside a sacred time. And honestly, it would be a routine. Like you would do this at least once a week. You would have a sacred time where for a certain amount of time, you would sit in the silence and you would feel the communion with God, feeling I am one with, which is obviously innately saying I am enough, because of course God is enough, right? So feeling that oneness and communing in that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Roxy, I see your hand is up.
These answers this week were so great from Neville teaching. The part where you wrote about soul responsibility. So the idea that is your own job to do, and that source, God will figure the rest out. And it brought me, there was a conversation that was very enlightening that I had in the post, one of the posts you posted earlier this week. And there was some idea of, if you're doing certain things in the world of Caesar, in the 3D world, are those indications that you haven't accepted your desire? You haven't done the Neville work. So if you are doing certain things in the 3D world, it negates that you do not believe in the Neville work. You're not actually practicing Neville. And so what goes beyond after that soul responsibility, that I thankfully, because being a part of the mastermind, I now get the nuances of what that means. And I think the person indicated of feeling like, does this thing really work? And I think a lot of people who listen to Neville, no matter how many years, you get that idea that, is it as simple as this? And in fact, it is as simple, but there are nuances to you being able to, it's a practice. Neville practiced this. So listening and saying, okay, I agree with Neville, does not mean that you know how to really do it, unless you yourself learn the intricacies of the art of imagination. So because it seems so simple, the idea that what happens beyond the soul responsibility, and how does that relate to action? Because I now understand that there's going to be inspired action, and it doesn't negate you doing your responsibility. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so there are definitely nuances here, and what you were saying about it being a practice, absolutely, yes. So so acceptance of the end, which is usually a state, right? Yes, we are condensing a sensation, but really that sensation links back to a state. So accepting the end of the state, and then the idea is, if you're taking action, to do it from that state. Okay. So really, and I know the conversation that you're talking about on YouTube too. I was like, hey, are you guys seeing my posts? And someone was like, why don't you just assume that we're seeing your posts? I'm like, the whole point is to start a conversation, because my imaginal act is that I have a vibrant community that is connected. So that's part of me like starting a conversation. So to me, it felt aligned. But to the person, they're like, wait a second, like, are you not, by asking the question, like, are you guys here? You know, like mic check, right? Are you assuming that we're not here? Right. So there's definitely some nuance to this. So in my mind, I was assuming yes. And this is a way to like really create conversation and like, you know, kind of do a little bit of a sound off. Right. But to someone else, they're like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. So there's definitely nuance here. And you can't really point to someone else and say, I know what state they're in. Right. You can't really do that. But I do understand how it can be, how it can create questions. And I'm actually really glad that it did, because I think this is an important part of the conversation to talk about these things. In my mind, inspired action, when it's inspired, it feels normal and natural. And it comes from a place of feeling more possibilities as opposed to less. Okay. So when I get an urge, I test the urge to do something, right? Make a post, send an email, you know, make a video, whatever it is. I test the urge. Is this coming from a place where the energy feels like it's sagging? I'm an empath. I feel energy very, very distinctly. Okay. So for me, it's very clear to me. If I'm like, oh, I need to, you know, I'm afraid people aren't hearing me. I need to make this post. To me, when I get that urge, I'll be like, hold on, that feels like a sag. Something's off about that energy. Okay. So in that case, I will question it, be like, what am I inputting? What are the thoughts that I'm believing that are true that is leading to kind of this sagging energy, which is a reduction of possibilities. Okay. And then likewise, when I get an impulse and I test the energy of it and it feels like expansive, like it's creating more possibilities, or it feels like a lift of energy, then I'm like, oh, okay, this feels aligned. You know, this feels like something that is aligned with the state that I'm living in. So let me take an action that feels inspired because it feels like it's moving in the correct direction. Okay. It's not trying to force it to be so. It's moving in the direction of the flow that it is so. Okay. So there, again, is that something someone else can really assess? Not really. I have to really be in watching the tides of the moods in my own heart and being aware of the place from which my action is taking place. And obviously it's very easy it can be easy depending on how practiced you are, because it is certainly a practice. It can be easy for some of those things to slip past your filter. Okay. So when you catch that, then it's just simply a matter of revising or revising, kind of the same thing, but basically getting back in the correct state. So just a simple realignment. And what you'll find is that literally life becomes this process over and over and over again. It's constantly impulses, testing the alignment of the impulses. When it feels like it's aligned, moving forward with the action, because that's what we call inspired action. And if you get it wrong, it's simply revising it, recalibrating, getting back into the proper state, and then trying again. That's again, it's a practice, and this is mystery school. We're here to practice this, right? So you can't really get it wrong. You can only get feedback that helps you optimize. Okay. I hope that's helpful. Okay. Andrea, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Good morning, Sunday Mystery School family.
Good morning.
I have the most wonderful testimony.
All right.
So last week, when you spoke about desire being of the Father, what we want, what God wants in our oneness. So I was scheduled to go to a conference in Florida, and these are my books. And they are called the Metaphysical Love Stories. And Dr. Jean Watson, she's a nurse and a metaphysician. It's her conference, the Caring Science Conference. And I was invited to read the excerpts that I've written about my protagonist being a Caring Science, Caritas nurse, which is what we are, Caritas nurses, basically spiritual care nurses. But I am scheduled to have a hip replacement in 2 weeks. So I've been in a lot of physical pain, having difficulty getting around. And I had convinced myself that I could not go because of these physical limitations. And I'm like, why are you arguing for your limitations? And when you talked about the desire, that my desire was actually of God and I am of God, I said, I'm going. And so I made the arrangements to have a wheelchair meet me at every step of the way. I had to take three planes to get to Florida from Northern California. And, you know, it wasn't physically easy, but I was able to get there and read the excerpts from my book that were about the caring science experience to the caring science creator, the theory. And it was so good. It was really, really so good. So sometimes we need to remind ourselves who we are and whose we are. And that's just putting it into action. I'm so grateful.
That's beautiful. Congratulations, Andrea. What a lovely testimony. And it sounds like that was quite an experience. I'm sure you lived that in your imagination before you did.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I did.
Yeah.
I just got back last night, so I'm still high on it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
It's so, Dr. Johnny Cochran used to say, it works if you work it, you know?
Yes. Beautiful. Works if you work it. Awesome. Thank you for that share.
Thank you for reminding me.
Of course.
What my desire is his desire too.
Yes. I like that. Yes. Works if you work it. Paula, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Is my sound on?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. My question is sort of related to Arlena's question from earlier. Neville talks so much about how to shut out information from the physical senses. But he never talks about how to deal with negative input that's coming from inside while we're trying to imagine. And that's my challenge. You know, I can shut out what's going on around me, but as soon as I start imagining, then some part of me steps in and says, no, either you can't have it, or you're doing it wrong. So then I feel like I have to stop and take a break and then maybe start over in a few minutes. What do you think about that?
I think this is a very relatable question, Paula. I think probably a lot of people have experienced something like this. So it indicates quite obviously that there's some aspect of your being that isn't fully on board with what you're doing. There's kind of creating some sort of resistance. So there is an opportunity to kind of sit down and have a conversation with that part of your being to learn about it. The idea that if it's poking its head, like sticking its head up at those times, then it feels like it's not really being seen. So it's trying to get attention. Okay. So it's like,
oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So it's like, how do I acknowledge and make peace with this part of myself so that I can put this to rest? And to do that is not to keep pushing it aside, but rather to actually give it a chance to speak and actually have a meaningful conversation with it. So, I mean, you may find a variety of things. Obviously, this is something you can do in the silence of your own awareness. You can have a conversation with it, but you may find that there's some fear there. And a lot of times these voices, they come from younger parts of ourselves that experienced something a certain kind of way and then made a meaning out of it that persisted, right? And to the present, even if that meaning is no longer true, like meaning, you know, Paula, in your current mature, you know, metaphysically grown, spiritually mature state, this meaning may no longer serve you. Okay. And the fact that you're asking this question right now says that it doesn't, right? But it's only reason why it's there is because it's been unchallenged until now. So the idea is to let it speak and kind of hear it out, and then use your current understanding to reshape that meaning. So kind of give it more context, right? So like, I'm just going to give it kind of a really silly basic example. So, you know, in Neville and Chill, I interviewed this woman, Angela Haley. She was telling her magical love story. And she was talking about how at a very young age, she asked mom for a Barbie and mom said no. And so in her very young childlike mind, that was like God saying no, because, mom can be kind of like a God.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she made that mean that God would not give her things. Right. So mom said no to the Barbie became, God said no to that, like to having a man. Right. So it's a kind of a simplistic thing, but like, that part, until she challenged it, was like, wait a second, it's actually not what that means at all. It's just, mom wasn't even trying to be, that way. She just, to her it wasn't even a big deal. Right. But like going back and finding that previously unchallenged assumption and saying, hold on, that's not what that actually means. Let me bring my current spiritual maturity to this and rewrite the meaning. So that can be an opportunity to liberate. So that's what I would invite you to do, is to like really hear it out and see what's there, and then seek to make peace with it in a meaningful way, and see if you can enlist that part of your being to be an ally rather than some sort of resistor or
Nice.
Right? It would be super nice. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Paula. Okay. Some inner child work. I'm able to see the YouTube comments here. So I'm just taking a look at the YouTube comments here. Use your inner child for that. Yep. That's one way to do it. We fall, we get up, try again, like a child learning to walk. Play with that. The game of life. Yes. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So that does it for today's Sunday Mystery School. I'm really loving these questions, these discussions that we get to have as a result of not only what the students were bringing and what Neville is bringing, but also just this opportunity to update the conversation, to bring it into the modernity, to kind of give new language for it, and to really expand it in a way where we can get more of the depth of meaning out of it. I just think there's something truly amazing here. I just want to mention one more time, if you have questions, we would love to include them in our upcoming SMS live stream for Q&A. So find that description, find that link in the description of the YouTube video. Go ahead and fill that out, and we will have that live stream coming up. So that's all for this time. We will continue next week. There is a Neville and Chill on Tuesday. Looking forward to that as well. It'll be 8 p.m. And until next time, imagine wisely, my friends, and practice. And we will see you all in the next.